Hi guys. Chapter 18, Torvald Knuckle Meat. Right when we ended on the last one, we were getting ready to go through a bookcase. We knew it was a traveling bookcase, someone like carries on their back. One doesn't have any books in it. We finally get through, and then next thing we know, there's someone pointing a gun at Sophie Quire, and he's got 3 other ones in his belt. Oh, I gotta show you the picture. Torvald Knuckle Meat. It is one thing to see a gun in the wild. It is another thing altogether to have a gun pointed directly at you. Sophie stared at the man before her who was watching her with his good eye. His one good eye. The other was hidden behind a black silk eye patch. The man smiled at Sophie. "Down from the wagon, if you don't mind." "Who are you?" she asked, pressing herself against the bookcase, which was now firmly shut. "My friends call me Torvald Knucklemeat. Not that I have any friends." He spit out a gob of tobacco juice through the gap in his front teeth. "I'm the one who owns this wagon, which up until recently was loaded to the brim with all the manner of valuable goods. Goods belonging to me. One moment I'm hauling this old empty bookcase back to the city when I hear this big loud crash behind me. Imagine my surprise when I pull over to find 2 little stowaways, 3 counting the pet." Sir Toad growled. "I'm no one's pet." "Easy, kitty. I'll blow them whiskers right off your face." If the man had been startled to hear Sir Toad speak, he did not show it. He propped his elbow on the back of the wagon in a philosophical pose. "Now, I don't know why you lot thought to board this here wagon, but I do know that it was a hefty mistake." Peter stepped right to the edge of the wagon. The mistake was threatening my friends. Sophie was just as worried about Peter as she was about the gun. She could tell he wanted to fight the man, but no blade, no matter how fast, could parry a bullet or dodge a bullet. The man smiled up at Peter. "You must be the hero of this old bunch. I've met my share of heroes, not too fond of them if I'm being honest. Heroes tend not to think things through. For example, they pick fights with men who've got pistols pointed at their girlfriends." Sophie's eyes went big. "I'm not his girlfriend." She knew it was ridiculous to be concerned about that in a moment like this, but some things cannot be helped. He flashed a rakish grin. "Well, you ain't his sister. I can see that plain enough." He squinted, peering at her, and almost felt as if he were looking at her through his eye patch. "Where's it from? Where's it you're from exactly?" Sophie pulled her cloak tightly around herself. Something about his gaze made her flesh creep. "My father's from Busselburg. My mother's from the Topaz Isles." This, at least, had been what the Book of Who had told her. The man's eyes widened. "The Topaz Isles, you say?" He worked the wad of tobacco under his bottom lip in a manner that suggested deep contemplation. "Aren't you the mysterious one?" Sophie stared right back at him, refusing to give him the pleasure of making her squirm. Torvald Knucklemeat was a tall man with a face that seemed to epitomize the word rugged. His skin was weather-beaten and tan. He had clearly not shaved for several days. The patch he wore over his eye felt almost excessive. The only clean part of him was a golden star that hung from the lapel of his threadbare coat. "That badge in your coat," she said. "You work for Busselburg?" "I'm a deputy officer," the man said, adjusting his badge. "The inquisidor charges me to sniff out dangerous nonsense." "Doesn't he have guards for that?" Sophie said. "The easy stuff he leaves to the guards, but sometimes nonsense can be a bit shy to show itself. Lucky for me, I have an eye for such a thing." So saying, he lifted up the flap of his eye patch. Sophie, despite her discomfort, was too compelled to look away. She saw that his eye had been replaced with a cloudy glass ball that shimmered in the early afternoon light. The skin around the eye was crisscrossed with angry red scars. "What is that?" Sophie asked. "It's a scrying jewel," he said, replacing the patch. "Swiped it from an old fortune teller in the marshlands. Put it in myself. Not pretty, but extremely useful in my line of work. Helps me spot unusual things." "You put a jewel in your eye socket?" Sophie broke away from his gaze. "That's revolting." "It's not that bad," Peter muttered. Sophie looked at the remaining junk scattered across the wagon bed. Nearly everything in the wagon she could now see would qualify as nonsense. She turned over an old flower pot with her toe inside was a writhing crop of little green sprouts. Beside her was a little mouse nestled inside a fur slipper. Beyond that, a Scarabian oil lamp that was unlit but still radiating heat. The Grimwald is supposed to be free, she said. The no-nonsense laws don't apply this far. They don't, strictly speaking. Technically, I'm only supposed to gather things within city limits, but I find it slim pickings nowadays. Most nonsense types have pulled up and fled by the time I come knocking, so I cast my net a little wider. He gestured to the forest around him. There's more bounty to be out here ahead in these parts, and they don't know you're coming. So a bounty is when they can get paid to find people. You can't just seize people without a warrant, she said. You're nothing more than a common thief. Sophie noticed Peter out of the corner of her eye. The boy lowered his head, his face turning red. Why is he embarrassed? Because he's what? Just a thief. Knucklemeat laughed. The Inquisidor had a problem with my methods. I'm not hearing about it. It's all fuel for his pyre. That sounds like Prig, all right, Sophie muttered. Knucklemeat's face lit up. So you've met him? He rubbed his chin in mock rumination. Interesting. Very interesting. Knucklemeat's face. Sophie felt a tremor of alarm. There was something queer, strange it means, about this man. It was as if he knew far more than he was letting on. The sooner they got away from him, the better she would feel. My dear deputy, she said in her most polite voice, we came to your wagon by accident. The truth is, she took a breath, deciding that honesty perhaps might be the best policy. The truth is, my companions and I have come here in search of a man named Magpie, Knucklemeat grinned. You're looking for the Baron? He laughed as if this were the funniest things he had heard in a long time. So you know him? Sir Toad said. I've done business with the man once or twice. Knucklemeat spit another gob of tobacco juice onto the ground. He's a connoisseur, a collector. When I find something too pretty to let burn in the pier, I bring it by his castle. The Baron likes one-of-a-kind things, and he pays well. He nodded toward Sir Toad. I'd wager he'd pay quite handsomely for that friend of yours. We're not selling, Sir Toad, Peter said. Sophie smiled as sweetly as she could, half wishing she had some of Madame Eldritch's befuddling perfume. Do you think you could find it in your heart to point us in the direction of this Baron's estate? It's not a half-day's ride from here, straight down the river, Knucklemeat said. Not that it'll do much good without an invitation. The Baron's not one for unexpected visitors. We'll take our chances, Peter replied. He turned to Sophie. Let's go. Not so fast, Knucklemeat said, raising his gun. As we've already established, I'm a deputy officer. While I'd love nothing more than to let you go, that would be neglecting my sworn duty. He stepped lazily around the back of the wagon. You see, I can't help but recall something the Inquisidor mentioned last time I saw him. Seems there's a fugitive who's giving him a bit of a headache. A swart-skinned girl right about your age who assaulted him and his men. She made off with a very unusual book. His eye moved on to the book of Who, clasped tightly in Sophie's arm. Not unlike the one you're holding right now. Sophie stepped back. I'm sure you're mistaken. The idea that Prig cared so much about finding her was distressing, to say the least. This guy sounds mean.